Hey guys. This is part 5 of What If Naruto Was a Sand Shinobi. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 26, Downpour. Steps echoed through the ruined building, even though the fighting going on outside was near deafening. To the two men circling each other, there was nothing else in the world at that moment. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Itachi stared each other down, their Sharingan eyes spinning the whole while. Neither one had made the first move yet, both knowing that the other was dangerous, too dangerous to rush toward. Madara knew that Itachi was quite possibly the best Sharingan user to come about since he had been in his prime. No one could surpass his skill or his dedication, not even his now deceased brother. Itachi knew Madara was cunning, canny, and devious. He knew of the man's ability to warp time and space. He knew that the man had forgotten more about the Sharingan than he probably would ever know. But Itachi held a couple of wildcards, aces that he had wisely kept hidden until now. One was his shield, a mystic mirror that reflected any attack. He'd had to tell Madara of his sword, but he hadn't told the man the whole truth. Yes, the sword trapped the user in a blissful genjutsu for all eternity, but that was not all it did. The sword was not material and therefore could be used in tangent with Suna. It was risky to use and more than likely death-inducing, but Itachi had nothing left to gain. Madara had everything to lose. Both knew the other had to die. The footsteps stopped simultaneously, and the two sprang for one another. A clang rang throughout the room, revealing both had drawn swords. Itachi threw his cloak off to the side, revealing the Uchiha fan on the back of his shirt, ripped in half by his own hand. It was a declaration to Madara that blood would not save him. The elder Uchiha sighed as he unsnapped his own cloak and let it drop to the floor, staring all the while at Itachi's back. So, you would even forsake your name? I'm disappointed in you, Itachi. I thought your goal was to re-establish the Uchiha name as an honorable one. Itachi slowly turned so he could see the orange mask of Madara with one eye, the Sharingan within it slowly turning. That dream died along with my brother. My dreams rested on his shoulders and he simply could not take the responsibility. I'm glad that Uzumaki Naruto killed him before he could shame our family even more. The younger man's eyes narrowed as Madara reached up to his mask and pushed it upward, revealing more and more of his face as he went. With one final shove, the elastic band holding it to his head slipped off and the porcelain cover clattered to the floor. I guess I won't be needing that anymore. I can see that I'll need both eyes to deal with you, child. No one else in our clan has ever come close to surpassing me. Yes, I'll have to deal with you accordingly. The sharp sound of porcelain breaking rebounded off the walls as Madara crushed the mask underfoot, his carefully measured steps taking him closer to Itachi. The younger man sighed unhappily and tightened his grip on his sword as his Sharingan began to spin faster. That was always your problem, Madara. You always saw the clan. You always saw them as an ambition for yourself. A stepping stone. That's why the clan had to die. They saw themselves as you had. They couldn't see my way of looking at the people within the clan. Madara cocked his head to the side, intrigued. And how did you see them? Itachi's mouth grew tighter and his muscles tensed. They were my family. That's why it hurt so much to kill them, and why you'll never know the pain I experienced when I did it. A clan is just a gathering of like-minded individuals. A family is made up of those who love one another. Madara received no warning before Itachi rushed forward. Talking was done. This was the same as when he'd fought Hashirama, a clash of ideals. The sand and rocks sprayed everywhere as Naruto dodged another swing of Samehada, the giant blue-skinned man wielding the massive Zanbatsu yanked it free of the trench it had created, and grinned. Not so high and mighty now, are you? I might not be at 100%, but I'm more than enough for you. Naruto skidded to a stop, his left hand slowing his slide with chakra, his right hand still clutching his staff. He'd never actually faced Kisame in battle, but he could see why the man was feared. The poison thorns he had used on the shark-like swordsman had been of the most lethal quality, plants that weren't even supposed to have an antidote. It was a testament to his tenacity that he was even standing and fighting. The pounding of feet behind Kisame alerted him to back up from Amigekyo troops, and he grimaced. He didn't want to fight more of those fanatical idiots. The leader of the squad led his men right up behind the glaring Hashigaki, his eyes locked onto Naruto. Kisame-sama! We're here to help you with the invaders. Allow us to. Kisame silenced the man without looking, swinging Samahata backwards and knocking the man's head clean off his shoulders. The other stared in horror as his body slumped to the ground and his killer snarled. He's mine! Stay the hell out of this or I'll kill you all! Naruto decided it was better to be safe than sorry and struck the ground with his staff. The AIM ninja never had a chance before giant roots crushed them flat. Kisame merely cut through them and rushed towards the kneeling Naruto. The blonde rose swiftly and blocked Samahata with his staff, causing Kisame's bloodshot, beady eyes to widen. What is that thing made of? Nothing has ever stood up to Samahata. Naruto slid to the side and let Samahata continue on its way, his staff trailing behind him as he swung for Kisame's ribs. Naruto saw a kick coming out of the corner of his eyes and peeled off to the side, running up a wall, flipped away. Kisame glared at the AIM nin and roared. I said he's mine! Naruto made no move to stop Kisame as he slaughtered the squad of AIM ninja quickly. The shark-like man turned to Naruto, his eyes ablaze. What's the matter? Not gonna yell at me about how their lives shouldn't have been wasted? Naruto frowned as he hopped off the wall, his coat flapping as he fell. Once he was on solid ground again, he began to glow a slight green again. Not really. You're just making my job easier. I've become a lot more used to the idea of taking life in my later years. Keep it up, Kisame. Your end is here. This day would mark another milestone in Kankuru's life. This was the second time he had ever invaded another country, and it was also the second time he had ever faced a member of Akatsuki. The last time he had faced a member of the organization, he had been alone and he had been foolhardy. This time, he had enough backup and he had the experience, but his opponent was like nothing he had ever faced. He heard Temari wordlessly scream in frustration as she slammed her fan down in the spot where Zetsu had been previously. Sanzoku sniffed the air for the man's scent and slammed his frizz tail down. It was maddening fighting the man. They needed a Doton user to uproot the earth, or at least someone with knowledge of what he could do. Zetsu grinned as he emerged high above them, his body halfway in the ruins of a building. We have not had this much fun in such a long time. Yes, but Mother always told us not to play with our food. Bah, Mother isn't here anymore, remember? Kankuru's salamander puppet rushed forward and up the wall, trying to catch the nin before he could escape again. The plant-like man merely disappeared and reappeared again, back on ground level this time. The salamander leapt off the building, landing beside Kankuru again, who frowned and moved closer to Temari, who was grinding her teeth. Ugh, he is so infuriating! We can't seem to hit him, no matter what. Temari nodded her head grimly, her eyes searching for any sign of the eccentric man, as her hands gripped her fan tightly. We need someone like Gaara here. He could crush the sand and drive him out. Or Jiraiya-sama. His Doton jutsu are especially powerful. Sanzoku growled and edged toward them, leaving them all standing in a line facing Zetsu. What we need is a way to keep him out of the ground. If he stays above ground, I can tear him to pieces. I can smell him, but I can't react fast enough to catch him. Temari! The blonde cut her eyes over and hissed. What? Can't you see I'm trying to watch him? Summon Kamatari next time you see Zetsu. He's really quick. Between the two of us, I think we can get him. Kankuru leaned over. What about me? Temari smirked and hefted her fan. Use your puppets like you should have been doing from the start. Paper whipped by the rake's cheek, leaving a shallow cut, as his fist sailed into a metal pipe, blowing right through it. Behind him, his top three ninja fought frantically to keep the other pieces of paper at bay. The large man spat on the ground and looked up to where half of Conan's body was hovering above them on a ledge, her stoic face staring down at them. The giant bent low and leapt upward toward the blue-haired woman, but the paper converged on him. The rakeage ducked his head and channeled electricity through his body, trying to fry the pieces of parchment, to no avail. Conan directed her small leaflets to slam the rakeage back to the ground. Only a few were burnt in the process. The paper returned to her body, reforming the lower half, while the rakeage stood up. So, she can only do so much with her paper body, that's useful. In this wet environment, it has to be a handicap. Samui stepped up next to him and spoke. Raikage-sama, we know nothing of her true abilities. What if this isn't even her? What if it's a paper clone? The rakeage grinned evilly and lightning crackled in his hands. Then we burn it to ashes and seek out the real one. Either way, this wench dies here. Ready your swords. Don't hold back. Tsunade had watched in awe as Jiraiya bit his wrists and began to paint his face swiftly with the blood. Before anyone could move, two small toads appeared on his shoulders, arguing back and forth around Jiraiya's head. Damn it, Pa! I had supper all laid out. He could have waited 30 seconds for me to put it away. Ma, Jiraiya-chan doesn't call us unless he's in trouble, and it looks like it's Pain again. The old female toad narrowed her eyes and glared out at God-realm Pain, whose fist was clenching and unclenching. Jiraiya never took his eyes off of his former student as he began to walk forward to join the front line again. I'm sorry for getting you two into this again. I really, truly am. Ma smacked Jiraiya in the head and turned her attention back to Pain. It's nothing, Jiraiya-chan. I'm just angry that supper is going to get cold. Tsunade and the others were stunned. The blonde Hokage had heard from Jiraiya that his form was powerful, but he'd also jokingly said that it was grotesque and that women would hate it. Her eyes roamed over his large bulbous nose to his sunken eyes, from his sharpened teeth to his newly appeared goatee. It was decidedly Jiraiya, and at the same time it was a totally new entity. She could practically feel the power oozing off of him. Sensei, this will be the last time you ever use that form. You escaped God's judgment last time. You shall not do so twice. Jiraiya grinned and stepped forward, ready to lead the charge. Your so-called judgment has cost a lot of innocent people a lot of things, Nagato. My arm, the lives of all the Jinchuriki, the sanity of the people of AIM, you are not what this world needs. The toad Sannin kicked his Geta off, sending them flying at Pain's head. They were easily knocked aside and the white-haired man bent low. Tsunade finally found enough of her voice to say what was on everyone's minds. Jiraiya, what did you do to yourself? Gaara, Kakashi, and the others nodded and Jiraiya snorted. We don't have time for that, Haim. I'll tell you all about it if we survive. The tall, ponytailed summon Pain was launched into the air by Demon Realm and Jiraiya pointed upward. Tsunade! Sakura! Take care of the summon's Pain! The two women set off, just as Summon's Realm brought a giant centipede and a multi-headed dog onto the scene. The rest of the group gathered around Jiraiya, letting him take command. The old pervert and the Ni-Dai Sannin all smirked and rushed forward, gunning for God Realm. Take whichever one you can! Be on the lookout for trickery! The Pain's Rinnegan eyes all narrowed and they spoke in unison. Let our justice be done! The Hachibi cackled as it destroyed another building and called out to Tsubasa. That makes 40 for me. How many have you crushed, Tsubasa? The Raccoon King swiped his tail, taking out another water tower. That makes 42 structures for me. Oh ho! What's this? The two behemoths turned to find a large centipede and a dog rampaging through the city. Tsubasa grinned and began to waddle in that direction at a clipped pace. First one to kill a summons wins? How about whoever kills the most? I'm curious as to how many he really has. Agreed. Destroying buildings was getting old anyway. Tsubasa's tail whacked the dog in the head, making it cry out in pain, and the Hachibi wrapped its tentacles around the centipede, both unmindful of the fight between Tsunade, Sakura, and Summon Realm below. Naruto and Kisame both noticed the summons of Pain and Kisame grinned. Looks like your friends don't have much longer. Pain seems to be pulling out all the stops. It's just a matter of time before they're stomped flat. Naruto's grimace turned back to a grin when he noticed Tsubasa waddle onto the scene and engage the dog, the Hachibi tackling the centipede. The blonde pushed the shark-like man backwards with a sudden thrust and sent a volley of vines to grab him. Kisame, though he was stumbling slightly, hacked away at the vines, none of them ever touching him. It seems the sides are even now. It was only a matter of time before Tsubasa and the Hachibi decided to join in the fight, instead of just destroying things. Now then, before we were so rudely interrupted, allow me to show you a bit more of what I could have done to you that day. Kisame wasn't about to give his foe an inch. He had had a long time to recover from that poison, but some of it was still in his veins, and the exertion from fighting was not helping him fend off the bile he could feel at the back of his throat. The blue-skinned man had never been sick a day in his life, and that sensation of being weak and helpless, he never wanted to feel that again. Samahata collided with that strange staff again and both men struggled against the other. Kisame reached out with his free hand and grabbed onto the blonde's throat, trying to choke the life out of him, when the green wielder exploded into smoke. The sudden loss of force against him made Hashigake lurch forward. Regaining his footing quickly, his vision caught a puddle of water and the sight of Naruto bearing down on him with a Rasengan. The sharp-toothed man spun quickly and blocked the attack with Samahata, absorbing the chakra. Nice try, kid, but you should have known better. Kisame screamed hoarsely when something suddenly bit into his legs and he looked down to see those familiar black thorns that had given him trouble before, another Naruto directing them with that damnable staff. The blonde who had tried to use Rasengan on him disappeared and the former member of the Seven Swordsmen shouted to the heavens. Damn you and your clones! I hate you! Naruto didn't even bother to grin. It was time to finish this one off and rejoin the others. His aura glowed a brighter green and he slammed the staff into the ground once more. Giant trees erupted from the ground, uprooting buildings and piping systems, encircling the two men. A wave of the staff brought forth vines that wove themselves around the trees, pulling them closer together, until no light could be seen between the bark. Kisame stood upright and gritted his teeth as he dragged Samahata across the deep scratches that Naruto's blade had made, in an effort to bleed out the poison. His beady eyes glanced all around at the arena Naruto had formed for them, and a devious plan came to his mind. So, I take it this thing you've made is escape-proof? Naruto nodded, a smirk on his face. Airtight? Another nod. Watertight? Naruto's smirk widened, but quickly disappeared when Kisame cackled loudly. The blue-skinned man couldn't believe his luck. His own smirk made Naruto uneasy. I guess they never shared the details of my fight with Madogai with you. This little area will be your watery grave. Naruto watched as Kisame flipped through a few hand signs and water began to spew from his mouth, filling the area as if by magic, for no human body could possibly hold that much within them. He cursed in his mind. Of course, Kisame was an elite for a reason. He was the premier Suiton user alive at the moment. This was not beyond the scope of his power. As the water rose, Naruto used his chakra to stay afloat. It would be much harder to use his green powers with this much water about. Or would it? Kisame's evil chuckle echoed across the blue expanse as he began to sink below the surface. Welcome to my world, you little bastard. Let's see how you like being on the receiving end of things that bite. Naruto readied himself for whatever may come, his mind already thinking furiously ahead. Madara had always known that Itachi was his equal. He had always known that the younger Uchiha would be a problem. The only thing that Itachi lacked was the eternal Manjikyu, and that wasn't proving to be much of a problem for him. The stoic young man was keeping up with him, and then some. He'd have to try something drastic soon. Itachi's eyes darted back and forth as he and Madara exchanged blows, either one ever landing anything decisive. Despite keeping up with his ancestor, Itachi was worried. His vision was blurring and he knew that prolonging his use of the Sharingan was dangerous. He'd have to use his available assets to even have a hope of killing the ultimate Uchiha traitor. Deciding that further wasting of time would be unwise, Itachi let his Manjikyu flare into existence, the colors of the world brightening. If all went well, this would be the last time a Sharingan was seen in this world. Madara was unfazed and stared across the expanse. I'll forgive you if you cease with this futility, Itachi. I know rebellion runs deep in the youth of the world. Itachi's answer was to open his eyes wide, and the black flames of Amaterasu licked and burned their way across the building's floor toward Madara. The older man watched the flames approach and his own Sharingan began to spin. Itachi ignored the flames that were being extinguished and instead sprinted forward through the flames, clearing a path as he went. His sword dipped down into the dark flame, coating his blade, and he slashed at Madara's chest. Engrossed in his task of controlling the flames, Madara's reaction was a tad too late. Itachi's sword bit across his chest, the fire searing into his flesh, and the wielder of the eternal Manjikyu screamed in agony. Letting his control of the rest of the flames go, he turned his attention to the ones licking at his now blackened skin. Itachi noticed the lack of control and regained the remaining flames. With his chest no longer on fire, Madara ground his teeth in fury, and shouted. Enough! Itachi watched in disbelief as the flames all disappeared into nothingness and looked back up. So, he'd have to try harder. Well, that was alright. Every Sharingan was different in a way. His just happened to be a very defensive one. Tsunade watched as the exuberant Tsubasa and Hachibi tackled the summons they had been after and blinked in surprise. She was sure that the summon's pain was just as dumbfounded, but there was no time to waste. Sakura! Come on, we have to stop pain! The girl with rose-colored hair gave a quick, concise nod and bolted after her sensei toward the blonde, ponytailed Pain. Rinnegan eyes turned to the two women, and two more beasts were summoned. How rude! I wasn't finished playing with my partner yet. Hey! Don't take the rhino! That's the one I wanted. Fine, then hurry up. Now, doggy, sit. The Cerberus look-alike dog cried out in pain and crumbled to the ground as Tsubasa slammed all its weight onto its spine, crushing it beneath his weight. Leaving the mutt to mend itself or die, he didn't really care which. The Raccoon King turned his attention to the giant panda that had appeared. With identical snarls, the two leviathans tied up again. The summons Pain scowled and prepared to summon more animals when a fist impacted with his face. The pony-tailed man flew to the right, toward a giant pipe, when a gloved fist slammed into his skull and he was sent flying at high speeds to the ground. Tsunade and Sakura both channeled chakra to their feet and rushed after him. Letting even one Pain have a moment to recuperate was a huge mistake. Jiraiya barked directions to all the assembled ninja, sending them toward the Pains as he strode forward, his eyes locked onto the body of Yahiko. He struggled to keep his breathing under control, his rage and excitement battling each other for supremacy. Pain simply looked on as his other bodies were entangled in individual fights. You won't win here. Your strategy has been tried before, and it has always failed. The white-maned toad Sannin stopped walking and chuckled. You're still the same scared little child that I remember. You might be revered as a god by your followers, but you're really a coward, Nagato. Rinnegan eyes narrowed, the first true sign that Pain was annoyed by anything. Jiraiya smirked and cut a glance to his arm. I don't know what this body's ability is. That puts me at a disadvantage, but I know something about you that you'll deny to your dying day. And that is? Jiraiya's smirk widened into a broad grin, made even more sinister due to his new looks. You're a coward, Nagato. A true coward. You're not even really here. The auburn eyebrows of the Yahiko body flew upward and Fukasaku squirmed a bit. Jiraiya-chan, you're wasting time. I know. But he needs to know that once we're done with these puppets that we're coming for him. He won't be able to hide behind corpses anymore. Pain didn't even bother to move as Jiraiya suddenly sprang forward, his fist drawn back. We shall see, sensei. Temari watched carefully as Zetsu rose from the ground once more, her bloody thumb swiping across the parchment of the fan quickly, and with a cry and mighty swing, Kamatori hurtled toward the two-faced man at breakneck speeds, his scythes at the ready. The weasel chirped as he flew, sending scythe after scythe at Zetsu's head. With a speed they hadn't thought he possessed, the man from Kusa disappeared into the ground again, and Kamatori came to a rest on the rubble of all the mortar and metal girders that he had destroyed. Clucking his tongue in annoyance, the vest-wearing summon scampered across the moist ground to stand by his mistress. I missed. Temari shook her head and clasped her fan closed again. It's nothing. Sanzoka can't catch him either. Kamatori looked up at his much larger furry cohort and snorted. Well, he has been getting fat, just lying around all the time. Sanzoka growled and shook the moisture from his coat. I'll deal with you and your snide comments later, cousin. Right now, I need your help in finding him. Don't aim for his head next time. Send your blades to his knees, make him leave the earth. If he's not touching a solid surface, he's exposed. Temari spread her fan once more and Kamatori hopped onto the parchment with a squeak, his giant scythe tucked behind his back. His beady eyes narrowed as they waited for Zetsu to poke up again, and he prepared to summon more of his deadly sickles. The blonde woman grimaced and spoke in a quiet voice. Kankuro, henge your puppets into us and then cloak us with the genjutsu. Keep everything as true to form as possible. Draw him out to the center of that clear spot. Kankuro nodded his head and did as he was told, his puppets rushing to the middle and looking around as he hid the original bodies with a clever illusion. The four watched as the puppets began to bicker with one another, twirling to watch all sides. Zetsu leered at the puppets from a high vantage point across the clearing, deciding how to deal with them best. He was getting bored at this point, and hungry. Kakashi, Lee, and Guy had taken the mechanical Pain as far away as they could, trying to keep its vision obscured from the others. It didn't matter if the other Pains shared a field of vision with each other if they couldn't watch each other's backs to make it effective. Guy and Lee were giving a ball, dodging the attacks of the multi-faced man while Kakashi stood back, waiting for an opportune chance to strike. As he stood there, he noticed that the area they were fighting in had already been ravaged by someone, as there were several bodies strewn about, and several telltale signs that Naruto had been there. Case in point, the various vines and flora that were not native to AIM. His trained eye then noticed that, while the rest of the area was mortar, concrete, and steel, there was a large structure that seemed out of place, Edging over towards the object of his curiosity, he knocked on it and found it to be an expanse of trees, incredibly large trees, that were bound together and formed some sort of fort. Leaving the mystery of the trees for the moment, he turned his attention back to the melee below and watched carefully with his Sharingan for an opening, but in the back of his mind, he was worried. If Naruto had been here recently, then where was he now? And who was he fighting? High above the city, in the uppermost room of the tower that Itachi and Madara were battling in, a blue-haired woman pressed against the glass of a window, looking out over the fighting that was taking place. A heavy sigh escaped her lips as she turned away, her fingers trailing down the pane, making a slight squeak. Konan opened her eyes and looked across the room to the other occupant, who sat in a curved, eggshell-shaped chair. My Bunshin will not last long against the Raikage and his followers. Soon, they'll seek out the others and begin to help them. I know. Her normally stoic visage flashed with anger for but a moment, before returning to passiveness. I don't know what is going on with your bodies, but I know that you have never faced a force like this before. Hanzo was getting on in years when you defeated him, however powerful he may have been. I know. Konan knelt down on her knees before the figure and gazed into its eyes. Gray, ringed eyes stared back at her from between a mass of black hair, the traces of madness behind them easily visible. Her pierced lip trembled, and she reached out a hand for the man's pale cheek. I'm scared, Nagato. What if we've been traveling the wrong path all along? What if Jiraiya-sensei was right last time? You've been calling yourself a god for so long. The gods will not look kindly on that if you die and have to face them. Rinnegan's eyes twitched back and forth, but he didn't register otherwise that he'd heard her. Konan stood up and went back to the window, looking out over the sprawl once more. A scratchy voice floated to her ears and she closed her eyes. I am pain. I am God. Just as the old stories tell of life on earth being extinguished because of man's wickedness, so shall my wrath be felt. I will cleanse this world and begin a new one, under a new God. Konan didn't answer. She'd heard it all before. That didn't make the sinking feeling in her stomach go away though. Chapter 27, Surprise, Surprise. Boom. 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 Kakashi looked over his shoulder at the giant trees behind him, unnerved with the incessant pounding coming from within. He could only imagine what was in there that could make that kind of unholy racket, and hoped that it didn't have anything to do with Naruto. He'd only just recently gotten back in his former student's good graces. He didn't need him dying on him just yet. A hand rocketed past his face, barely missing him, and struck the bark hard, sending a shower of splinters in the copy ninja's direction. He leapt to the side and ran for better cover to wait for his chance to strike. Guy and Lee engaged the pained body again, distracting it from sending more missiles his way. Curious as to what the construct's true purpose was, Kakashi crept back over and looked at where the pain had struck at him. A tiny crack in the structure was bleeding water, and the crack was getting bigger every second. Well, he'd have to figure it out later. The cat part of his nickname was killing him at the moment though. And you know what they say about cats and curiosity. Hold still, you little bastard! Naruto ground his teeth in frustration as he ran sideways on the trees he had created, a water shark striking the wall just behind him every few feet. Kisame was showing just why he was a prominent Suiton user, effortlessly creating the sharks despite his weakened condition. Kisame had not come out of the water for several minutes as he tried to skewer Naruto with water spikes, tear his flesh with water sharks, or rend his flesh with a quick swipe from Samahata when the blonde ventured too far out into the water. The blonde couldn't even catch a moment to concentrate so he could try his plan, and Kisame knew that. His head was only above water long enough to taunt his opponent before diving under again. Naruto was noticing something that he hoped Kisame wasn't though. As he ran around the cylinder, he noticed that the water level was dropping at a slow, but steady pace. This could only mean that something had punctured the outside wall at some point, meaning there was fighting going on near them. Imprisoning both him and his opponent suddenly wasn't such a hot idea, as he couldn't see or help his comrades outside. His hands flew together in the seal for Kage Bunshin and 4 of them puffed into existence, already running along with their creator. He needed to get Kisame out of the water and fast. The 4 peeled off and sprinted across the water, stopping at even intervals near the edge. Kisame poked his head out of the water just high enough for his nose to break the surface and breathed. The gills on the side of his head provided him with a bit of oxygen beneath the surface, but he was still human and had to come up for air. He noticed the 4 clones as they ran across the water's surface. How could he not? The ripples they sent throughout the liquid reverberated through him. He didn't need to know what his idiot of a foe was planning. He just knew he had to stop it. The Rasengan they were forming weren't helping his disposition any, and he took off toward one, sending water sharks for the other three. The sharks hit their mark and he shredded the surprised clone with Samahata, letting his sword eat up the chakra hungrily, before whipping around to seek out Naruto. The Jinchuriki was standing parallel to the water, his eyes shut in concentration, his hands wrapped tightly around the gnarled staff. Kisame didn't need to know what he was concentrating on to know it was bad news for him and propelled through the water like a torpedo. Naruto's eyes snapped open when Kisame's shoulder slammed into his gut, and he was rocketed up the side of his ring of trees, before being driven into them with bone-jarring force. Kisame snarled, slammed Samahata into the wood hard enough that it would stick, and grabbed the blonde's head, pushing his nose just millimeters from the spiny barbs of the Zanbatsu. Kisame's gravely voice seemed to echo as he breathed hard, the exertion beginning to take its toll as the poison wound its way through his veins. No more games, boy. I'm sick of this. You've caused me a lot of pain and that is unacceptable. Now I'm going to cause you some. First, I'm going to use Samahata on your face like a cheese grater. Then, I'm going to cut each limb from your body one by one. I want you to feel what it's like to be pierced by little spikes. Too bad Samahata isn't poisonous. Are you quite through? Kisame's head jerked back slightly in surprise before he grinned ferally. Still trying to act like a big shot, huh? You ain't got shit now, kid. Want to know what I'm going to do with that oversized back scratcher of yours? I'm going to use it to rearrange your bitch's face. The blue eyes of Naruto seemed to become like ice as he turned his face as far to the side as he could to glare at his captor. Don't talk about her like that. I'll make this hurt more than it has to before you die. A cackle echoed through the wooden prison and Kisame's teeth shone with maliciousness. Scratch that. I'm just going to rip your throat out. I hate the sound of your voice. Kisame opened his mouth as wide as he could and leaned down to complete his threat, when something tugged at his throat. He coughed a bit and grabbed at whatever was assailing him, his eyes flying open when he touched something plant-like? Another sharp tug and he was pulled away from the blonde, who planted his feet and stood up. More and more aquatic weeds wrapped around Kisame until only his eyes and nose were visible. Naruto took a deep breath and closed his eyes. You know, you really are something, Kisame. You fought off a poison with no antidote, fought me at less than full strength, and proceeded to make a lake and fire off several high-powered jutsu. But... His eyes locked on to the giant blue man's and Kisame's speedy eyes glared back. I wonder, Kisame, how long can you hold your breath? Small white eyes flashed open and Kisame began to struggle against his bonds. Naruto motioned downwards with his hand and the weeds began to sink, pulling Kisame along with them. He glared at the blonde as he sank, his whole body shaking with unbridled anger. If he could just call Samahata to his hand, but he was so weak. He'd been running on fumes for at least the past 3 minutes. A Kirigakure ninja's greatest fear was drowning in their own element. Being masters of water, it was both dreaded and shameful to be taken under and drown. That was the reality that Kisame was now facing. Naruto watched as Kisame sank below the surface, leaving hardly a ripple as the weeds held him firm as they took him down. He felt nothing from this like he had with Sasuke's death. He had fought Kisame and he had won. Kisame had to die, otherwise he'd just heal up and come after him again. He looked down into the crystal clear water and could make out the eyes of the shark man as they radiated hate, defiant to the last. Kisame held his breath for nearly 3 minutes before trying to filter in oxygen through his gills. To his dismay, only a small amount of the much-needed air siphoned into his lungs. Horror sat in when he realized that the mass of weeds was sucking out all of his precious oxygen out of the water to speed its growth. His mouth opened involuntarily as his lungs cried for air, and he sucked in some water. His chest began to feel heavy, and he turned his gaze upward. The clear brilliancy of the water allowed him to see the man who had defeated him, no, the man who had killed him. His brain began to feel foggy and he struggled to maintain that glare, that last defiant glare. He would not die like this. He wouldn't die by drowning. He was Hoshigaki Kisame, member of the Seven Swordsmen, member of the feared Akatsuki, wielder of Samahata and the most feared Suiton user in the world. He wouldn't die like this. Kisame never felt the subtle constriction that the hydrilla was putting on him, forcing all the air out of his body and letting the water fill up his lungs. He never knew when he had begun to drown, so focused was he on his hate of Uzumaki Naruto. His vision just kept fading and fading until it all went black. Naruto looked down into the lifeless eyes of one of the most feared men in the world for a moment longer and turned away, walking up the edge of the wall and crouched on the ledge. He'd leave this construct up for now, just in case. Hunkered down on the ledge, he looked out over the area. There were several disturbances all around, but only one fight he could see. Two green blurs rushed around one of the bodies of Pain, trying in vain to smash it to smithereens. The blonde smirked and watched for an opening. He had an idea of how to get rid of that particular Pain. Zetsu emerged from the ground right behind Sanzoku and licked his lips. He'd never eaten a red panda before, but he'd heard it was very gamey meat. With an omnivorous diet, it was sure to have a distinctive flavor. He'd heard what his foes had said about the genjutsu, and had already released himself from it as soon as he'd felt a tug at his psyche. Of course, dual personalities helped the process a bit. A vicious smile raked across his white and black face, and he suppressed the urge to lick his lips. The oversized rat had to die first. It was more dangerous than the other three combined. It was able to smell him, and if those claws or those teeth got a hold of him, it would be his body torn to shreds. With great care, the cannibalistic shinobi's jaw-like protrusions opened wide and he lunged forward, only to hit air. Yellow eyes widened in anger and surprise as the sound of whistling blades reached his ears. The former Kusa ninja whirled about and found Kamatari hurtling through the air, several sides following behind him, his own held firmly in his paws. The weasel was so close to the ground that his fur was getting dirty, and Zetsu realized that he would not be quick enough to retreat into the ground as close as the summon was. Running to the side was also not available as the wind jutsu from Temari, and the amount of steel headed in his direction forced him to go in one direction. Up! Zetsu knew it was a trap. He knew what they were up to. Kamatari passed beneath him, the whistling of his steel sides fading as the distance, and the two-toned man's face twisted into ugliness as the weasel smirked. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw that infuriating salamander puppet clinging to the wall suddenly leap toward him, its tail ready to stab and its mouth open, needles at the ready. A volley of needles flew toward him, and Zetsu kawaramied with a piece of pipe, the ring of metal on metal resounding through the area. He hadn't had to use jutsu in so long that he was somewhat rusty, and had nearly been skewered. No doubt those needles were coated in a poison quite like the one that Kisame had been stricken with. The psychotic ninja crouched behind a mass of concrete and looked out over the area for Temari. The girl was almost as big an obstacle as the rat, coming up with strategies and barking orders. Kill her, and they would become disorganized. Zetsu licked his lips in anticipation and rose a bit more to get a better look. A sharp pain in his leg caused him to nearly cry out, and he glanced downward, sure that he had been careless and a jagged piece of metal or glass had scratched him. He'd nearly given himself away in surprise. His yellow eyes widened exponentially when he found a perfect U-shape on his right leg. He'd forgotten about that damned size-altering rat for a moment, but when had it struck? He hadn't seen it near him, hadn't heard it, and hadn't sensed it. A sharp pain in the back of his head erupted as he rocketed back to the middle of their battle zone, flopping unceremoniously to the ground. He was immediately surrounded by all four of his enemies and the puppets. Zetsu stood to his full height, his skull still racked with pain, and sneered at all of them. "We are through playing with you. We shall strip the flesh from your bones. But we'll make sure you're alive to watch as we do." Sanzoku's teeth were on full display as he snarled. "Not if I strip yours first." The air in Jiraiya's lungs rushed out as he hit the wall, and Ma and Pa cried out in surprise. Despite being fused to his shoulders, it was still a jarring blow, and not a very pleasant one. The bored look on God Realm's face wasn't helping the three's disposition at all as it stood with its arms at its sides. "Would a coward stand and face you as such, sensei? Would a coward fight you as such?" Jiraiya sucked in a huge lungful of air, and used his good arm to push himself back to his feet. With Senjutsu chakra running through him, the blow hadn't actually hurt, it had just stunned him. A smirk crossed underneath his bulbous nose, the jagged teeth making him look even more fearsome an opponent. "Nagato, you're a coward because you won't face me as a student to his teacher. Yahiko is dead. This is a perversion of time and life that I can't believe you would do. You were such a kind boy." Ma and Pa hunkered down when they felt Jiraiya tense up, and set their jaws when he rushed forward again, his fist cocked back for a mighty blow. The body of Yahiko frowned and blasted its former sensei back again with a Shinra Tensei. Jiraiya slammed into the wall again, and was immediately back to his feet, his eyes shadowed by his hair. I think that's enough research, don't you, elders? Ma nodded her head and her round eyes blinked. Yep. More than enough. We know his weakness now. Sure, Ma. You'll give it away. God Realm tilted its head to the side, curious as to what they meant. He had been careful in all his fights thus far, especially with his primary body, not to give away any secrets. Jiraiya rushed forward again, and Pain's eyebrow twitched in annoyance as the man slammed into the invisible barrier again. The barrier dropped as the large, white-maned man rocketed backwards, and the count began till the next time he could use the jutsu. Without warning, Pain exploded into the back of his skull, and he found himself flying forward, straight into one of the large metal pipes. Jiraiya landed deftly in a crouch, a smug look on his face, as Pain righted himself once more, a look of shock on his normally bored face. 5 seconds, Nagato. That's your secret for this body. Without your shared vision, you can't predict anything behind you. You're vulnerable. Pain stood to his full height and frowned. His cloak was muddied now, and he'd been touched. That had never happened before. I see. I guess I'll have to increase my odds once again then, Sensei. Tsubasa, the Hachibi, Sakura, and Tsunade stared down at the broken remains of the summons, and the summon realm Pain. It had been a difficult battle. The Cerberus had kept splitting into smaller dogs and reforming. The panda was impervious to pain. The rhino was thick-skinned. The centipede was just creepy. The Hachibi's breathing was labored as it stood beside Tsubasa, and it turned its head slowly. I'm through. I can't sustain this any longer. If the two of you can hasten Kira's healing, he will help in the coming battles. I risk destroying my host's body if I stay any longer. Tsubasa nodded and bowed his head. Thank you for your help. It was most appreciated. Please. I haven't had a chance to cut loose like that in ages. I enjoyed myself immensely. The Hachibi began to shrink in size until it left a battered and smoking Hachikira. Sakura began to heal him immediately, being careful to only hasten his own natural abilities as Tsunade stood watch. Her senses, enhanced by chakra, adrenaline, and battle, caught the whistle of the air as it was displaced. She spun on her heel and threw her right fist forward, her eyes widening when it collided with Hell Realm, sending the body flying off to her left. The body collapsed against a building, sending a shower of rubble down upon it, and sat unmoving. Tsunade kept her gaze trained on it, knowing that that couldn't have possibly been enough, when the sand around them began to shift and Gaara stepped into the clearing. I hate the moisture of this place. It makes fighting such a bother. Sakura looked up from her work on Kira, relief on her face. Tsunade, however, was not as receptive. Damn it, Gaara! We're supposed to keep them separated. The red-headed kazekage looked down at the prone body of the summon's Pain and shrugged. Yours is dead. What is the danger? Tsunade's eyes narrowed as she hissed at the younger Kage, listening as the rubble began to shift around. We don't know what these bodies do. They're dead in the first place. Two together could be trouble. Gaara simply stared at the Hell Realm as it stood once more, his eyes narrowing. I swear, it keeps getting back up. It's like there's something special about it, but I haven't figured out what it is yet. Hell Realm stared out across the expanse between it and its opponents, its eyes finally settling on the prone body of Summon's realm. So, you actually defeated that realm. Very good. No one ever has before except for Sensei. It was all futile, however. Tsunade's eyes widened when a huge head appeared behind Hell Realm, and she screamed at Sakura. Sakura! Get out of there! The pink-haired girl's head whipped around just in time to see the huge Enma head and the tendril coming from it. Scooping Kira's body up, she leapt away, just as it grabbed for her. Gaara growled and sent his sand toward Hell Realm, only to have Tsunade stop him. We need to see what it's capable of. We need to know what that head does. Gaara's perpetual frown deepened as his sand swirled around menacingly. I don't want to know what it does. It tried to grab Sakura-san, so it can't be good. Let's just destroy it. The two watched the tendril as it crawled across the body of Summon's Pain and brought it back into the mouth of the Enma head. The head chewed for a bit before spitting out Summon's realm, good as new. Tsunade gawked at the sight and Gaara's teeth ground together. See? I told you waiting was a bad idea. Hell Realm didn't seem to notice their discomfort as it looked over Summon's realm. That was impressive. I won't allow you to destroy my summons again though. The three active shinobi grimaced and prepared themselves for what was sure to be the worst fight of their lives. Pains seemed to have limitless energy, something that they did not possess. The two Pains readied themselves, sure of victory now that their shared vision would help them. No one in the area thought to look up. Madara's teeth threatened to ground down to the gum in fury. Itachi stood before him, enshrouded in the protective armor of Susanoo, the giant form looming menacingly with its shield and mystical sword. This was one form he could never match. His eternal Manjikyu allowed him to forever be youthful, full of vitality, and gave him free use of his Sharingan. It gave him many things, control over Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, but Susanoo had always been beyond his reach. Itachi stood in the middle of the spectral figure, gazing out over the expanse at his ancestor. He hated this man with all his heart. Madara was the focal point, the sole reason for the decline of the Uchiha clan. Everything that had ever happened could be traced back to his betrayal of family and country. Only one thought crossed the younger Uchiha's mind: unforgivable. The ghostly warrior that was Susanoo raised its sword above its head and sent it crashing down toward Madara. The elder shinobi rushed away as the weapon crashed down, only to pass through the ground, leaving no trace of damage. The sword rose again and settled on the long-nosed being's shoulder. Madara regained his bearings, his mind racing for some grasp of what he had seen. That the sword was merely an illusion was not feasible. If it was incorporeal, then it had another purpose besides physical damage. Itachi was never one to flaunt his abilities, and therefore, he knew nothing beyond the few battles the boy had had since he had taken him under his wing. This thing that had taken form around him was something he was totally unprepared for. Another swing of the sword, another dodge, and Madara unloaded a huge fire jutsu at the being. The ghostly shield came up before Itachi, and the elder statesman of Akatsuki watched in awe as the fire impacted with the shield, stopping it completely. Itachi stared out at him from within, his Sharingan-clad eyes unblinking and filled with hate. The flames died down, and the shimmering form of Susanoo grinned, ready for the next assault. Madara was livid. Nothing he could do would work apparently. Well, it was not the first time he'd had a setback. Being eternal was as much a boon as it was a curse. He could afford to retreat and plan again. Akatsuki was one of his better ideas, but it was not his only one. The eternal man readied himself for a leap out of the hole behind Itachi. "You won't make it!" Madara froze in his tracks, his knees already locked for the jump, and spared a glance at Itachi. "And why is that? I've come too far to allow an upstart like you to stop me." Itachi merely blinked, his lips hardly moving as he spoke. "You won't make it because I already have you. You're within the barrier of Susanoo. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out." Madara slowly stood to his full height and snorted. "I think I would know if I was captured, young one. I've avoided all the swings of that sword, and your armor still enshrouds you, not me." "You're wrong." Madara's eyebrows rose to his hairline as the shimmering form of Susanoo began to form around him. His breathing became erratic as he ground out his question. "How?" Itachi merely looked up through the destroyed roof as the rain began to fall again. "Susanoo is not merely half a body, it is a whole one. Its size simply encompasses whatever it wishes. The breastplate of the armor is the strongest point, so it simply enshrouds its user in its chest. The rest is below ground. Incorporealism is one of the features that best identify it. Now you're trapped in here with me. There is no escape." Madara's brain raced furiously in a bid to find a way out. Susanoo, however, was an impenetrable barrier. Not even Pain Shinra Tensei could match it. Seeing physicality was not an available option anymore, he decided to try diplomacy. "What now then, Itachi? We're both trapped until you release the jutsu. What do you hope to accomplish?" For the first time in years, Uchiha Itachi smiled. Such a sight was enough to make even the normally unflappable Madara quiver. "I plan to end the legacy of the Uchiha clan. Today, our clan dies with us." Madara could only wonder what the boy meant. Did he mean to kill himself as well in some misguided form of seppuku? But Susanoo protected all in its shell, what could he do to himself? The spectral form of Susanoo raised its arm above its head and flipped the sword to a reverse grip, the blade now held to stab downward. The sudden realization of what Itachi was planning brought only one word to Madara's mind. "No!" The Raikage growled as he let the last pieces of paper flutter through his fingers before turning to his followers. "It was merely a bunshin. The bitch is still out there. Come on. We have to find Kira. I don't sense the Hachibi anymore." Hell Realm and Summons Realm prepared themselves for battle, Hell Realm taking a step back and Summon's Realm taking a step forward, ready to summon more creatures. Tsunade heard the groan of Kira as he awoke, but feared it wouldn't be enough. With their field of vision now multiplied by 2, these pains would be nigh impossible to beat. The figure sitting above leapt from its perch, hurtling down towards the people below it. Its size began to grow and grow as it fell. Before Summon's Pain could slap its hand to the ground, a resounding boom echoed throughout the area and the 4 allied shinobi covered their eyes against the assault of mud and water. Gaara was the first to lower his arms and relief flowed through him. Sitting on top of both of the pains was Tsubasa, his teeth bared menacingly. The 4 ninja watched as the Raccoon King reached down with his dexterous fingers and picked up the prone body of Hell Realm, lifting it to where he could see it. It seems that this pain is very important. Well, it's been a while since I've had a snack. Sakura and Tsunade looked away from the scene as Tsubasa bit into the body of Hell Realm, severing the shoulders and head away from the rest. Whatever chance it had of reforming itself was gone. As the women turned green, Kira and Gaara watched as Tsubasa swirled the meat around in his mouth before grimacing and spitting it onto the ground. Blia! It tastes awful, like rotten meat. The 2 men laughed at the king's misfortune as it ran its hands over its tongue, trying to get the awful taste out of its mouth. Humor could be found, even in the midst of battle. Kakashi still had not found his opening with Azura Realm, and it was beginning to frustrate him. A trained assassin he may be, but he never met an opponent as frustrating as this one. Guy and Lee were having trouble as well. Despite their speed, they couldn't land a truly damaging blow on the mechanical man. To make matters worse, that wooden citadel behind them worried him. He didn't know what was going on in there, but it couldn't be good. The water was escaping more frequently now. If only they could find a way to neutralize this body. His senses suddenly picked up an incoming energy source and Kakashi looked up in time, just to catch the sight of Naruto hurtling out of the sky and crushing the mechanical pain below him. Metal and flesh flew everywhere as the pain exploded and Naruto stood upright, a grin on his face. You guys looked like you needed some help. Kakashi sighed and closed his eyes as he lowered his hitite, partly in relief that Naruto was alright, partly in frustration that his former student had again entered a battle without full knowledge of what was going on. Konan gasped when the memories of her Bunshin reached her. The Raikage and his swordsmen were fearsome opponents, and her Bunshin had not been a challenge at all. A slight, low growl behind her made her attention turn to her companion. Your Bunshin is gone, yes? She nodded her head in affirmation. Nagato frowned and his fingers gripped the armrests of his chair with more force. This Uzumaki and his pet raccoon are most troublesome. They are alike in their battle planning to a degree that is uncanny. What happened? Rinnegan eyes locked with Konan's and Nagato's teeth bared. They destroyed Hell Realm, Azura Realm, and Summon's Realm. Crushed them in similar manners even though they were nowhere near each other. It is most annoying. Konan turned back to the window, gazing out. I don't see the Hachibi anymore. What will you do now? I will kill Sensei and everyone else I can. Then we shall see. Can you bring another Hell Realm to the front line? His eyes closed, in frustration or pain she couldn't tell. I have never found another suitable body for Hell Realm. It seems that my last 3 paths will have to do. Can you defeat Sensei and the others? We shall see. It is foolish of them to challenge a god on his own turf. Amigakure is my realm. It is my heaven and my hell. I rule all here. I control all here. And I will bring down my wrath upon them. Konan's forehead touched the cold glass and she closed her eyes as she whispered. What if your wrath isn't enough? Nagato sank back into his chair, his eyes narrowing. We shall see. Chapter 28, A New World. Incoming! Jiraiya barely dodged to the side as the Raikage plowed into God Realm Pain, slamming the walking corpse across the muddy ground, and landing heavily, his followers behind him. The Raikage grinned as he came out of his crouch, moving in front of the panting Jiraiya. Looks like you need some help, old man, don't worry. The swordsmen of Kumo and the world's strongest man are here to save the day. Jiraiya's beady eyes stared up wearily at the Kage, not really knowing how to respond. He needed a breather, that was true enough. Perhaps this was fortuitous. If they could keep Pain occupied for a little bit until Ma and Pa could gather more natural energy. He puts up a barrier to repel attacks. After that, you have a 5-second window where he can't use his jutsu anymore. Keep him occupied until I come up with a plan. The giant black man snorted and squared himself off against the now recovered Pain, the swordsmen unhooking their weapons and readying themselves. 5 seconds is all we need. Catch your breath, Jiraiya of the Sannin. We'll handle it from here. Pain let out a long, slow breath as his gray, ringed eyes took in the ninja of Kumogakure. You don't interest me. Go away. Samui took a step forward, her sword held at her side. You interest me. I want to know how a dead man can walk. Maybe if I slice you up enough I'll find out how you do it. The gray eyes narrowed and Pain's cloak fluttered slightly. Yahiko will not be destroyed. Omoi quirked his left eyebrow upward and rolled his cigarette around his mouth. Who the fuck is Yahiko? I thought your name was Pain? It doesn't matter. Let's go. The 3 swordsmen followed their leader into battle, the stony-faced Pain awaiting them. Human Realm had not been having nearly as hard a time as the other Pains. His opponents, while skilled, were nowhere near powerful enough to hinder him in any way. Team 10 had been little more than a nuisance, with Shikamaru's planning and shadow manipulation being the main factors of annoyance. Chuji had tried his best to keep the body occupied while Shikamaru came up with a plan, but the taijutsu-using Pain swept him aside like a child. Growing to the size of the summons had only made him a bigger target for the long-maned corpse. Pain's fist had found its way into his oversized, rotund belly. The gentle giant's girth reduced rapidly, and a hard knee found its way to his chin. Ino had tried to use a chakra scalpel to cut the body's tendons, but she was nowhere near quick enough. Just before the auburn-haired cadaver ruined her pretty face with a punch, it froze in place, and she heard the 5 words that made her muscles relax. Kagemain no Jutsu success. Shikamaru let his hands pull apart, his body shuddering with exertion as the clinically dead body fought his control. His breathing was ragged as he forced his arms to his sides. Ino, disable him. Do it now! The blonde pulled a kunai from her pouch and took a hesitant step forward, before looking back over her shoulder. But Shika, you'll get hurt too. Shikamaru grunted as his right arm began to move on its own, a sure sign that his control was slipping. Just do it. You can heal me afterwards. We still don't know how Chuji's doing. Ino didn't bother to nod as she turned her attention back to the shaking Pain. The kunai in her hand raised into the air and lingered but for a moment before she plunged it downward into the chest of the pierced man. Shikamaru gasped in pain and his grip on Pain nearly slipped. He had to endure this. If Ino could strike a debilitating blow on Pain, then she could hurry and heal him before he bled out. It pained Ino to do this to Shikamaru. His gasps coming from behind her were like a knife through her own heart. She needed to finish this quickly. She had to help her boys. Shutting her ears off to the sound of Shikamaru's groans and whimpers of pain, she thrust the kunai down again, only for her hand to stop. She looked up into the Rinnegan eyes of Pain, his gaze cutting through her. That's enough. Ino began to shake as his grip began to crush her wrist, only to cry out when she felt the bones begin to pop. Pain cast her aside haphazardly and glared at Shikamaru, who held a hand to his chest, his breathing labored. I'll deal with you shortly, girl. Shikamaru had never felt this weak. Not when fighting Taiyuya all those years ago, not when he was in his second Chunin exams, not even when he fought against Kakuzu and Haiden. His team was decimated once again and now this abomination was going to kill him, kill them all. And thanks to his own willingness to sacrifice himself like a shogi piece, he was unable to protect himself. Pain's unblinking eyes rolled down to the kneeling Nara, taking him in. I've heard that the Nara clan prides themselves on being incredibly smart. You all play shogi. You know about the sacrifice of pawns to save the king. That's what made your little play here so strange. You're obviously the king. Why did you try to sacrifice yourself? Shikamaru merely rolled an eye upward and grunted. Troublesome. Yes, you are. Pain's hand shot forward to grasp the Nara's forehead, and the young man closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Rinnegan eyes turned to the side, catching a flash of blonde, and Pain blasted Shikamaru with a roundhouse kick as he grabbed an attacking Ino by her head. Ino felt the fingers on her forehead, and suddenly she could feel something probing deeper inside. A slight tug on something that was uniquely hers. Light flashed, and she shivered. Her father had described the feeling of mind walking to her in detail. Whatever this was, it was similar, and yet so very different. A chill ran up her spine as her eyes locked with those of the Rinnegan. Another tug and she fought back. Whatever he was reaching for deep inside her wasn't his to have. She used every bit of her will to push his presence out. And then she screamed. Pain let go of the blonde girl with a gasp, her body crumpling to the ground unceremoniously. A tingle ran up his arm that left him baffled. No one had ever fought off his soul-stealing technique before. Intriguing. He left a battered and broken Team 10 in his wake as he stalked off towards where Hungry Ghost Realm was fighting a pair of Hyuga. When this was all over, he might have to come back for the girl. Hell Realm might have a new body. Itachi watched as the spectral sword of Susanoo came hurtling down and gasped when it entered his body, piercing his soul. He heard the cry from Madara as it entered the man as well and closed his eyes, giving himself up to his own illusion. Perhaps an eternity of lies would be kind to him. His world flashed for a moment, and then all was silent. "Hello, son. We've been waiting for you." Itachi took in his surroundings with wide eyes, not believing what he was seeing. He was seated before his family's dinner table. His father sat opposite him, quietly sipping his tea, while his mother chopped carrots for a stew. "Mother? Father?" Fugaka sat his teacup down and stared curiously at his son. "Yes, Itachi?" The younger Uchiha touched the table in front of him gingerly, as if it would fall apart. Fugaka quirked an eyebrow and frowned. "What troubles you, son?" Itachi looked up from the table, hope in his eyes. "Is this real? Are you here?" A clunk in front of him brought his attention to a bowl full of steaming stew. A soft hand settled on his shoulder, and he gazed up, taking in his mother's smile. "Of course we are, Itachi. Eat your stew before it gets cold." Itachi's head nodded absent-mindedly as his hand groped for the spoon. Gingerly he dipped the utensil into the stew and brought it to his mouth. A few quick blows and the spoon was brought to his mouth, where he slurped it, savoring the flavor. Fugaku and Mikoto watched confused as tears ran down their eldest son's cheeks. Itachi turned to them, a smile on his face. "It's so good. It's just like I remembered, so good." "Brother, why are you crying?" Itachi froze in his place, another spoonful of stew halfway to his mouth. His lips quivered as he turned slowly to find a young Sasuke standing behind him, his big round eyes curiously appraising his brother. Itachi sucked in a lungful of air and shook. "Sasuke?" Itachi pushed himself off of his comfy pillow and crept forward on his hands and knees toward what he was sure was a ghost. His hand rose shakily and he poked a surprised Sasuke in the forehead. His breath caught in his throat when the child cried out in protest, and he crushed the little boy against his chest. "It's real. It's really real. You're all alive. We're together again." Mikoto smiled at her eldest son's antics, and put her hand on Itachi's head. "You're going to be late, Itachi. She's on her way over. You'd better go get ready." Itachi's head whipped around to face her. "Who's coming?" His mother's smile widened as she turned back to her cooking. A knock from the front door echoed throughout the house and Sasuke ran out of the room, shouting that he would answer it. "As if you didn't know." "Ah, there she is." Itachi turned slowly to the doorway where he heard footsteps and his heart nearly stopped when he gazed up into his lover's face. Her gentle smile warmed his heart, and he suddenly didn't care if this was real or not. He stood and crossed the room and, taking her in his arms, kissed her deeply. He wanted nothing more than the family and woman that he loved. This beautiful lie was better than the ugly truth. Madara watched, furious, as Itachi gave into the genjutsu with a blissful smile, his arms open as if accepting something or someone. He would not be taken by this illusion. He would not succumb to this farce. Closing his eyes so as to better concentrate on fighting off this intrusion on his mind, he focused on breathing, knowing that his own body was real. "Brother?" Madara's eyes wanted to snap open so badly. But he knew if they opened, he would succumb to this hateful illusion. The timbre of the voice was just as he remembered. If he opened his eyes and saw the visage of his brother, then he would not be able to come back. He knew that. "It's not really you, Izuna. I know that. It's just an illusion that is torturing me. Illusions aren't real and my Sharingan knows that. I know that." A tinkling laugh came from behind him and his heart fluttered. Oh, but this delusion was cruel. Now it had begun to imitate her. "Husband, why won't you look at me?" Madara took in a shuddering, angry breath, his teeth grinding against each other. "You're not her. My wife has been dead for decades. Of course it's me, husband. Here, I'll even prove it." Sharingan eyes snapped open when a pair of soft arms wrapped around him from behind and a familiar weight pressed into his back. The arms squeezed him in a way that he would never forget as an almost forgotten voice breathed into his ear. "We're here, husband." and will never go away. Ever again. Madara heard her words, but his eyes remained locked onto his brother's face. Izuna smiled at his brother and nodded his head. Yes, brother, we're real. Now stop being foolish and hold your wife. She's missed you. Madara sucked in a lungful of air and spun around, his arms encircling his wife's waist as he crushed his lips to hers. This was his test if this was real. Her taste, the feel of her rose-petal soft lips, her smell, it was all uniquely hers. This had to be real. Why, then, did it feel so wrong? Why did it feel like it wasn't there? His wife happily returned the kiss, melding her body against his as Izuna laughed joyously. See, brother? It's as real can be. Our Sharingan can't be fooled by illusions. Madara nodded his head as he cradled his wife against him. Yes, he had been foolish. But he still felt like a fool. Izuna laughed some more as he clapped his brother on the shoulder. Why, the only way to fool the Sharingan is with another Sharingan. And if you've been fooled, then there's no way to check it. You need to check it with another Sharingan. Madara nodded his head, happy with that explanation until something clicked. He was ecstatic to see his family again, but something nagged at his mind. His family wasn't under a genjutsu. Their own Sharingan would have caught it. Perhaps it was only him. There were no other Sharingan in existence, and he wouldn't take his family's eyes. No, there was another, an eye that possessed an ability unknown even to him. Hatake Kakashi. The background of the scene darkened as Madara pushed his wife away. Tears poured down her face as Izuna caught her. Husband, why do you push me away? Surely you're not leaving again? Madara shook his head, his brain now fuzzy as his psyche fought against the power of Susanoo. Things began to fade in and out as reality and Genjutsu pushed against one another, one overlapping the other, confusing him even more. He had to be sure. His wife hung off his right side, pleading with him to stop as his brother tried to reason with him. As reality and illusory perception began to blend into a cocktail of confustication, Madara's muddled mind kept grasping onto one thing. One of these had to be real, either his family or the muck and rubble before him, and only one man could help him now. Hatake Kakashi and that single Sharingan eye. XXXXXXXXX1010 and Shino leapt back to safety, each cradling a drained Hyuga in their arms. Niji and Hinata had put up quite a fight with Hungry Ghost Realm, but their Jukin relied on chakra to be effective and the fat man just absorbed their blows like a sponge. Before long, the two had been drained of most of their chakra, leaving them weak and helpless. Kiba and Akamaru engaged the rotund warrior next, giving the weapons mistress and the Kikai master time to get the two Hyuga to safety. After checking their vitals, the two returned to back up the feral fighter of the group. Shino was worried. This body, no, this corpse, as his bugs had informed him, was making a mockery of everything they did. It stood there, with its ever-present scowl and gray, ringed eyes, not saying a word. It reminded him so much of the attitudes of many of his own family. For but a moment, he wondered if this was how the enemies of the Aburaim saw them. But, even an Aburaim tried to stir the emotions of their enemies in battle. This thing wouldn't even do that, and it infuriated him. Any bugs he sent to attack Pain simply fell to the ground as soon as they touched the time-stilled flesh. And Hinata and Niji had proven that hand-to-hand combat was not the answer. Even now, he could see Kiba and Akamaru slowing down, though they were fighting valiantly. Nothing seemed to touch him. His eyes shifted when he saw Tenten preparing herself out of the corner of his eyes. She would have to take point against this foe. A Kikai floated to Akamaru's shoulder and warned him of what was to come. A bark signaled Kiba and the two began to turn the Pain so it couldn't see what was happening. The duo began to lead the Pain away from Tenten and into position. Tenten waited until she was sure the peripheral vision of Pain was no longer focused on her, and unleashed a barrage of kunai at his back. The Konoha ninja all watched in shock as he evaded every weapon thrown without ever looking. In the shadows, Human Realm sat crouched, waiting for opportunity to knock. Hungry Ghost Realm had decimated this team. Of course, not many could stand against the chakra-absorbing ghoul. He could see the Aburaim watching with hard eyes as the girl continued to chuck every last weapon she had at the fat body, only for everyone to miss. He let his chakra disruptor rods fly just as the Kikai master came to his realization. There's another one! His warning was not fast enough, however, as a rod found its way into his back and the sides of Akamaru and Kiba, shocking them into submission as their chakra began to move about of its own volition. Tenten spun when she heard the shout and batted the rod aside, only to see Shino get taken out by a rod as well. The Aburame fell like a sack of bricks and his bugs swarmed out around him, agitated by the disruption of their host's chakra. Human Realm stepped out of the shadows and strode purposefully towards Tenten, who moved to the side and stood before Hinata and Niji, her sword at the ready. The ponytailed body cocked its head to the side, as if perplexed. "Why do you stand there as if you can harm me? Do you not know I'm a god? I can end your existence in a heartbeat." Tenten gripped her sword tighter and narrowed her eyes as she watched the fat Pain step beside the other. "You're not my god. And you never will be." She barely got her sword up to block the rod that Human Realm thrust at her, only to gasp as Hungry Ghost Realm slid one into her side. She stumbled backwards and fell on the ground, helpless as she watched the two stalk toward Niji and Hinata and slam more of the rods into their bodies. Hot tears ran down her face as she watched the blood seep from the wounds. She was confused, though, as to why he didn't kill any of them. Pain saw the look of confusion on her face and stared down at her before nailing her hands to the stone behind her with another rod. "I'm leaving you alive as a bargaining chip. I haven't killed anyone yet of your generation. I need you alive for the time being so that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki will know that I am God. I hold your lives in my hands. With but a whim, I can kill you all at once. Such is the power and wrath of God." Tenten could only look on at the destruction the man had caused, her entire team, all her friends, powerless. Zetsu melted out of the ground away from the battleground he just escaped. He was a high-rank ninja, but even he knew when it was time to retreat. The Suna ninja were bad enough, but the two summons made moving about incredibly difficult. It was almost like they knew where he would pop up. His body was littered with cuts from all of the various jutsu used and he wasn't sure, but he thought he'd been nicked by one of the boy's poisonous needles. His body was resilient, but nowhere near the level that Kisame's was. Vaguely, he wondered if his comrade was still bedridden or had decided to join the festivities. He couldn't remember being this tired after a fight in a long time. Not that he'd had many fights in recent years. Perhaps that was why his senses were dulled slightly. Perhaps that's why those children had gotten so many hits in on him. Well, he'd show them. If Pain left any of them alive, he was going to personally kill them himself. He'd rip their limbs off one by one and eat them while they watched, saving the juicy intestines for last. Perhaps the years of inactivity as a shinobi had dulled his senses somewhat. But he was still the best infiltrator and spy around. That's why it was so astounding to him when his trained ears didn't hear the familiar whistling nor his trained senses feel it when his left arm suddenly fell from its socket. He looked down in surprise as his blood flowed freely from where his arm had been. He was surprised that the pain had not registered yet. That's when he felt the breath down his neck and froze. "I told you that I'd rend your flesh from your bones. Nothing in this world can save you once I have your scent. I'll follow you anywhere you go, and as injured as you are, you can't go far." Sanzoku's teeth shone as he grinned and began to grow larger and larger. Zetsu's yellow eyes widened in shock. Nothing he had ever seen had prepared him for a summons like the raccoon. "Scream for me, bitch." Off in the distance, Temari and Kankura heard the screams and yowls of both Zetsu and Sanzoku. The siblings shared a look and then took off for where they sensed the most chakra, leaving behind the horrid squeals of a dying cannibal and the broken remains of Kankura's blank and Jiraiya watched intently as the Kumo shinobi once again rushed Pain in a wave and were again repelled. The Reikage rushed in for the 5-second interval only to find himself in a game of cat and mouse as God Realm backpedaled away until the round was up. Ma and Pa gathered the necessary energy for what was to follow and opened their eyes again. "We're ready when you are, Jiraiya-chan." "Good. Prepare yourselves. I don't know if this will work or not. Don't tell me what to do, little boy." "Ma, not now." The three watched as Pain repelled and the two tiny toads immediately began to croak, singing their song. Pain heard the song and narrowed his eyes. He needed to end this quickly. Jiraiya was too dangerous to allow the sage to live any longer. He carefully counted out the 5 seconds and just as the illusion was beginning to take hold, he cast his hand forward and pulled Jiraiya in. Jiraiya's eyes snapped open when he felt the tug on his body, and the song stopped immediately as the trio flew toward Pain's outstretched hand. Jiraiya's eyes widened in realization of what was about to happen. He watched as Pain's hand stiffened so that his fingers were pointed forward. Jiraiya was about to be impaled through the stomach. Jiraiya hit the arm at high velocity, his innards rushing out his back as Pain's hand displaced them. Blood rushed from his mouth as the Kumo shinobi looked on in horror. Jiraiya's eyes glazed for a moment before the light shot back into them as he used his last strength to grip onto Pain's arm. Let's see you dodge while carrying all this weight, Nagato. I'll see you in hell. The two toads on his shoulder jumped free as his chakra faded, shouting out for him just as Tsunade entered the area with her group in tow. Her scream echoed across the expanse and Jiraiya smiled as he coughed up more blood, his voice coming out in a whisper. Had tears for me, Tsunade? And here. I didn't think you cared. Tsunade collapsed on her knees, unblinking as she stared at the sight of Jiraiya's now lifeless body hanging from Pain's arm. She couldn't believe it, another of her friends, her loved ones, gone. All because of some egomaniac with a god complex. Rage boiled within her, and she rose to her feet, until someone clapped a hand on her shoulder. She looked up into the sad, blue eyes of Naruto. No, Bachan. No. Her rage immediately subsided and tears began to take over instead. The sadness and anger in Naruto's eyes seemed to wash over everyone present. Pain simply stood there, unimpressed as Human Realm and Hungry Ghost Realm landed beside God Realm and pulled Jiraiya off forcefully from the arm with a wet, sucking sound before casting the body to the middle of the open space. Jiraiya's body hit the ground hard and rolled a couple of times till it came to a stop, his face still smiling. Tsunade's tears redoubled and Sakura put an arm around her to support her as Naruto strode to his sensei's body. By now, every one of the invaders had gathered to help, but stood at the edge, not willing to interrupt. Silence roared in Amigekure as Naruto kneeled beside Jiraiya. You didn't deserve to die like this, killed by a former pupil. He died by my will. That was enough. Naruto didn't bother to look up. Pain wasn't his concern at the moment. He picked up Jiraiya's body and brought it back to Tsunade, setting it down beside her. Just so you know, Jinchuriki, I am God here. I will bring peace to this land through my force rule. There will be no war under my rule. It will be utopia. And those who stand in the way of my justice, my will, become dust. Naruto tried to ignore the obvious bait, but it was becoming harder. In the back of his mind, a presence stirred that he had long since thought was forever silenced. I have your friends, Jinchuriki. A simple pulse of my chakra and they all die of heart failure. No, they won't. I've already had my clones looking for them before we arrived. The rods are being removed as we speak and they're being taken to safety. A slight quirk of the lips was all that showed Pain's annoyance. Then I suppose more drastic measures are to be taken. God Realm's hand raised and Kairi was pulled into his grasp, dangling above the ground by her neck. Kira, despite his weakness, yelled out to her and Pain turned in his direction. Give yourself to me or she dies. If you come voluntarily, I'll let the Kumo ninja go peacefully. Kairi glared over his hand and spat into his stoic face. Fuck you. Snap. Pain let her body tumble to the ground and wiped away the spittle. Too slow. Perhaps one from Konoha this time? Kira and the Reikage were mortified. Was the man that untouchable? Pain raised his hand again, and Kakashi's eyes widened when he felt the pull on him. His hands flashed through hand signs as he was tugged along, and his Raikiri was ready by the time he reached Pain. God Realm watched impassively as Hungry Ghost Realm stepped before him and absorbed the blow, sucking all of the chakra with it. Kakashi gasped at the pull on his chakra and Human Realm caught him by the forehead. Come to me or Hatake Kakashi dies. No! Pain turned his head to find Madara behind him, without his mask, and his eyes looking dazed. No, not yet. Give him to me. Yes, brother, I know that. But I have to be sure. No, I can't simply do that. Madara, are you alright? Tobi's not sure if Madara's alright. Give us Kakashi. I will tell Tobi if we're alright. Human Realm handed Kakashi over and Madara grabbed him by both arms and slammed him to the ground. Yes, wife. I'll be very careful. Pain, hold him. I can't have him moving while brother is trying to distract me. The fat Pain held Kakashi down while Madara knelt beside the man. All the shinobi watched as Madara plucked his left eye out without a cry of pain. No, brother, it's not the same as when I did it to you. See? I still have my wonderful eye. This is just to see if this is an illusion. Kakashi could only watch in horror as the fingers descended towards his Sharingan. Madara had almost reached his socket when a huge vine erupted from the ground, smashed the Uchiha in the chest, and sent him flying. The pain-holding Kakashi barely avoided the swipe and leapt back to safety, leaving the vine to hover protectively over Kakashi. Naruto's green aura had returned and his voice was ragged as he raised his staff. No. You can't have his eye. But Tobi needs that eye. Madara must know what's real. The black fire of Amaterasu roared from where Madara had been thrown and latched upon the vine, burning it to a crisp. Madara was upon Kakashi in a heartbeat, straddling him, and thrust his fingers into the copy ninja's socket, pulling out the bloody Sharingan. Kakashi cried out in agony, but could do nothing as Madara stared down at him. Yes, brother, I agree. This man did steal our precious eye. And you know what they say, an eye for an eye. Blood hit Kakashi's mask as he gurgled, a kunai sticking out of his chest. Madara giggled as he stood up and put the eye in his own socket, hissing as it took hold. He blinked and then began to moan. No, 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 no. I can still see both. It's not fair. Why can't I tell if you're real? I want to know which is real. For Naruto, time stopped in that moment. His heartbeats slowed, his motor functions shut down, and the green aura pulsed wildly. The blonde Jinchuriki opened his eyes to a familiar sight and a frightening one. The cage of the Kyuubi was opened and the beast sat on its haunches in the light, its mouth open in what he was sure was a grin. Beside the massive beast stood a face he would never forget. It was the old man that had entrusted him with the power of the green. Ancient eyes gazed upon him, and a small smile lifted a white beard. Well, it seems it's time. Naruto shook his head, unsure of what the old man meant. Time? For what? To make your choice. The prophecy concerning you is nigh. Here you will either bring the world to a new level of happiness and prosperity, or destroy it. The old man silenced the growling of the Kyuubi with a single hand and continued. Make no mistake, boy, this is monumental. You were never supposed to have a say in the matter. You were never supposed to go to Suna. You were never supposed to attain my power. You were never supposed to meet the raccoons. This situation should never have been, and because of that, you get a choice in what happens next. But why? Wizened eyebrows lifted and eyes turned into a happy U-shape. Because Uzumaki Naruto, you fought fate and destiny, and won. You made your own path, but you still have to choose. My power, or the Kyuubi no Yokus. Choose my power, boy. I'll lay waste to your enemies, I'll slay them for you. I'll destroy everyone who has ever hurt you. All for you. You won't hurt anymore. There will be no more pain. Naruto listened to the honeyed words that poured off the beast's tongue and nodded before turning to the old man. What's your argument? A single eye opened and a dry chuckle rang throughout the room. You're going to die. What? You're going to die, one way or the other. You can either be a savior or you can be a demon. One or the other. But I can give you something that the Kyuubi can't before you go. What's that? I'll let you say goodbye to Temari before you die. Naruto turned from the Kyuubi, eliciting a snarl, and was about to comply when the old man raised his hand. Make no mistake, Uzumaki. This is a mere courtesy. You will not have long. And there is a price for accepting my power. You will become the embodiment of the green, just as you would become the embodiment of the Kyuubi. I will finally pass on, just as you will one day pass on that power to another worthy person. But it will be millennia before your mantle can be passed. Do you accept? Naruto thought for a moment before nodding. Yes. So long as I can say goodbye. A long, slow sigh escaped the old man's lips and he turned to the beast. Back to your cage, fox. Our time in this plane is ended. The Kyuubi ranted and snarled as the door slammed shut against it, throwing it back into the depths of the cage. Naruto watched as he began to fade out, a green aura encompassing him again. I'll let you see here right before you pass on. No sooner, no later. Good fortune, Uzumaki Naruto. And goodbye. The ninja all watched as Naruto began to glow with an unearthly power. His voice rang of a deep timbre as the green tendrils began to slide off of him. Leave this place. Go to safety. You have little time. Temari took a step forward and Naruto cringed. Don't do that. Just go. He turned to look at her over his shoulder and gave her a small, sad smile. Make sure everyone gets to safety. Get out of Amigakure. I'll see you soon, Temari. Tsubasa leaned down low enough that his head almost touched the ground. Naruto, are you? Yes. and I will complete my end of the bargain. All I ask is that you take everyone out of here. It will no longer be safe. Goodbye, Tsubasa. It was an honor to serve you. Tsubasa nodded his head and summoned several members of his clan to assist in getting the ninja out. As all the living were transported, many under protest, he turned to the now glowing Naruto. You're the last, you know. There will never be another summoner for us. All I ask is that you take care of her. Take care of them all in the world I create. Hi! I can do that. Farewell, Uzumaki Naruto. May the heavens guide you to a restful slumber. Tsubasa galloped off after the others, leaving Pain and Madara facing Naruto, whose eyes were now totally green. Madara tilted his head to the side and blinked, his eyes still bleeding. Why are you glowing? I can see it through both of my eyes. That's inconsequential. Tell me, Nagato, was it worth it? Pain nodded his head. To create a new world, the old one has to die. This is the truth. Naruto tilted his head back as the power coursed through him. His life on Earth would end when things had run their course, but his responsibility would be eternal. Nature, Nagato. New life is built on the death of the old, but the old is not simply destroyed. It's used to help create the new. That's what I'll be doing. Instead of razing it to the ground as you would, I will simply build upon the old world. I would give them a utopia, free of war and strife, with a new god. What can you offer them? Eden. And the choice of how to best use it. Our sensei's teachings will be the model for the new world. Help others, treat people with kindness. These are things he taught us. You warp them, I embrace them. The weak don't live to serve the strong live to serve the weak. The words of a mortal fool. Naruto's green eyes became slits as the power built to its crescendo inside him. They were the words of the god of Shinobi, the teacher of our teacher. Without warning, the power exploded inside of Naruto and his head and arms snapped back as a wave of green washed over everything. Wherever it touched, new life sprang forth from mud and rubble. Vines wove about the feet of Madara and Pain and held them in place, and lifted up the bodies of Jiraiya and Kakashi out of the muck reverently. Outside Emigaku's walls, the shinobi watched as the green wave passed over, leaving grass and flowers just outside the borders. Inside the city, trees began to erupt from the ground, tall trees of every distinct and beautiful kind. They marveled at their friend's power, but Temari sat with her brothers, her chin resting on her crossed arms. Naruto had said he would see her again, but it felt like he was saying goodbye. Naruto's arms fell as the power stabilized and his unearthly gaze settled on the men in front of him. They watched as he began to slowly stride toward them, every step taken bringing forth flowers that bloomed and then died. He stopped in front of Pain and brought his staff to chest level, aiming the end at God Realm's chest. Nagato grunted in frustration as he tried to force his realms to move. He would not be taken by this insignificant little insect. He was Pain. He was a god! No mortal could stand up to the power of a god. He didn't see Konan turn from the glass, so caught up in his struggles. He didn't see her hold out her hand. He didn't see her ever-present paper flower reform into a kunai. His Rinnegan eyes could see many things, but they couldn't predict betrayal. Nagato only saw her step in front of his chair and looked up to tell her to go away. He froze when he saw the tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. This is for Yahiko. Nagato's eyes crossed to look at the paper blade lodged in his forehead, and he gurgled a bit in surprise. He'd never been hurt since his eyes had changed. This sensation of floating, what was it? Was this death? But gods can't die, they're immortal. The last thing he saw with his many visions was a weeping Konan leaving through the shattered window, and the scowling face of Uzumaki Naruto as his staff thrust into Yahiko's chest. His last thought was that he didn't know which broke his heart more. Naruto frowned when Pain's three bodies went limp and looked up when he heard glass shatter. The blue-haired woman he had heard about flew out of the window, her paper wings shaped like that of a moth. How beautiful! Yet some moths were poisonous, and he couldn't let such a dangerous insect roam in the world to come. Madara watched through his hazy vision as Naruto held out a hand in Konan's direction and a huge Venus flytrap emerged from the ground. The giant plant grew to the woman's level and swallowed her whole, the acids in its digestive tract already working on her papery wings. It wouldn't be long before she was digested. He couldn't have her sowing poison in the new world. His gaze settled on Madara and the man squirmed. Are you real? Or are you a trick? Naruto leaned forward and beckoned with his finger. A rose bush grew behind the Uchiha, and the blonde picked a particularly thorny rose, brushing it against Madara's face. The man hissed in pain and Naruto spoke. Tell me what you see and I'll tell you if it's real. I see my family, my wife and my brother. I see the Kyuubi Jinchuriki glowing with an ethereal power that is green. I see Amigekyo overrun by flora. Your family is an illusion. Someone of your ilk doesn't get to see their loved ones when they die. Why? Because hell is torture. And seeing your family wouldn't be torture to you. The rose lengthened into a spike and Naruto drove it into Madara's chest. There would be no teleporting away, no phasing out. The man simply gasped and began to babble again. Wife, why are you fading? Don't go. Brother, don't go. Why is everything getting dark? Is this reality? Was everything a lie? Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. He didn't feel anything from pain or Madara's death. He didn't feel anything from Conan's. Perhaps that was the curse of being the embodiment of the green? Just like nature, you were neutral to everything? No, he wouldn't be like that. Deciding it was time to give in, he gave himself over to the power and heard a voice in the back of his mind. You have little time. Make it count. Temari had had her eyes closed as she prayed and had only opened them to see if anything had changed. To her surprise, she found herself on a street corner in Konoha. It seemed very familiar, but she couldn't figure out why. Don't you remember? It's the first place we met. Temari whipped around to find Naruto standing behind her, his hands in the pockets of his jacket. She ran to him and wrapped him in a hug, pressing herself into his chest. His arms wrapped around her as well and the two stood there for a moment in silence before she broke it. Why are we in Konoha? We aren't. Then where are we? Naruto gave her another small smile and motioned for her to follow. Come with me. We don't have much time. She walked beside him down the street, her ears catching the sound of feet shuffling behind them. A glance over her shoulder revealed an ancient man, leaning on a staff. Who's he? A friend. Don't worry about him. I have to tell you something. Sit. I'll push you. Temari hadn't realized where they were going or when they got there, but they were in front of the Konoha Academy, at the swing set. She obediently sat down, and Naruto began to push her. I'm not coming home, Temari. She slammed her feet into the ground, stopping her momentum and leaped out of the seat. What do you mean? I can't come home. He gave me this time to say goodbye. I wanted to let you know that I love you and I'll miss you. She shook her head. No, you have to come home. We have a life to build together. Naruto shook his head sadly and put his hands on her shoulders. Leaning forward, he placed a kiss on her forehead. I'm sorry. Promise me that you'll find happiness, Temari. My happiest times were spent with you. Just promise me that you'll be happy. Tears stung her eyes as she glared at him. How can I be happy without you? Take me with you. He turned his head to the side. I can't. Where I'm going, you can't follow. She whipped around to the old man, her teeth grinding. You. Don't take him. Please. And if you have to, take me with him. I can't do that. I don't get to say who stays and who goes. I'm only here to guide him. Temari's shoulders shook and tears began to roll down her face. But I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. I know you do. And I want to stay. But I can't. This is part of my sacrifice, Temari. She looked into his blue eyes, locking them to her teal ones. Haven't you sacrificed enough? Naruto smiled at her and wrapped her in a hug once more, crushing her to him, before leaning back and kissing her deeply. Temari tried to make the kiss last as long as she could until Naruto gently pushed her away and the old man touched his shoulder, not daring to look at her. It's time. Naruto nodded his head and gave her one more gentle kiss as he began to fade out. I love you, Temari. With all my heart. Be happy. Temari jolted out of her stupor when Kankura shook her shoulder. Temari, you okay? You started crying. Her response was to sniffle and then to launch herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and burying her face into his chest. Kankura, not knowing what to do, awkwardly patted her back as he looked to Amigekyo when it happened. Naruto never really opened his eyes the way Temari did. He simply let the power overtake him and pushed it outward, bending it to his will. He would give this world an Eden and a guideline to live by. He would bring peace to this world by taking it back to its roots. After all, if there is plenty, then there is no reason for war, and if the strong protect, then there are no weak. The green's new embodiment pushed its power to the limits, and Amigakure exploded into life and color. The green aura rushed out from the center of the elemental nations and into every nook and cranny. The invading shinobi gasped as grass and glowers grew under their feet and fruit trees erupted from the ground beside them. The people of Iwa were astounded when their barren soil bore vegetables and fruit they had never seen began to grow. The people of Kuma watched as their rocky terrains began to flower and bloom and vines began to grow on their tower. The people of Kiri watched as their soil, always too wet for most things to grow, began to become overbearing with bounty. The people of Konoha, a land that had always been rich, watched as the forests surrounding them became bigger and more expansive. The people of Suna watched in awe from their walls as the desert surrounding them became one massive oasis. They cheered, for this could only be the doing of their own Uzumaki Naruto. Tsubasa and his tribe watched with both excitement and sadness as the green once again covered the earth. This was what they had wanted, but the price was so high. He hazarded a glance downward to Temari, who had a smaller Sanzoku nudging her with his nose out of sympathy. A deep, rumbling sigh escaped his lips and he ambled off back toward Amigakure. Come on. We should go see what happened. Color was everywhere as they walked through what used to be a great maze of pipes and water. Colors of every shade and hue popped up around them, surrounding them and bombarding their perceptions with a fusillade of flora. The group followed along behind Tsubasa, but two in particular trailed behind, knowing already what they would find. I'll miss him. Please, don't say that. I'll stay with you if you want me to. I'd appreciate that, thank you. The various plants around them seemed to spread apart, leading them to where they needed to go. Tsubasa gasped when he came upon the site they had departed from and bowed his head. Everyone stepped around him to see what the matter was and gasped. Most started crying. Upon 3 seats made of vines sat the bodies of Naruto, Jiraiya, and Kakashi. One by one, they all came forward to see them. Temari wouldn't go and neither would Tsunade. It was too horrible for either of them. Shikamaru limped to stand before Naruto, whose chin rested on his chest as if he were asleep and squinted his eyes. There's writing above each of their seats. The others all calmed down as he began to read, starting with Jiraiya, then Kakashi, and then Naruto. I believe in a better world. Those who abandon their friends are trash. The weak do not serve the strong serve the weak. Words to live by. It's their legacy to you. The shinobi all turned to the Raccoon King, their attention given. They sacrificed everything so that you would have a better world. Do not waste it. Do not make their deaths be in vain. Hachikira, in a rare moment of lucidity and seriousness, turned to where the 3 shinobi were seated and knelt down. I swear on my life that this world will be better. I'll bring about change with my own 2 hands. And one by one, the others followed him, swearing to change the world for the better. Temari looked up from her spot, her cheeks and eyes red from crying, as she whispered to her departed lover. But what is a new world when my world is gone? Chapter 29, Epilogue. Dear Naruto, it was so very hard to get out of bed this morning. It's been a while since I last wrote, but then, as the years went by, I somewhat forgot the purpose. I'm sorry for that. I know you must have been lonely without me writing. I know that sounds silly. Let me fill you in on what's happened since I last wrote. We now live in a world without war, one where everyone lives in harmony. Oh, there's still little minor hiccups every now and then, but there have been no major battles or skirmishes in decades. Everyone heard of your sacrifice and chose to honor it. I was sad when you left, even though now I understand why you did. You didn't have a choice. I'm proud of you for being as brave as you were. I don't know if I could have done that in your place. I miss you, Naruto. I've missed you every day since that dreadful, horrible day. I tried to be happy for you, I really did. I tried to move on. I watched our friends get married, have children, and be happy. I watched your legacy grow, even when you weren't around. I've tried to uphold that legacy. I know you still watch over me. I know that, because the gardenias grow thicker in our home than they do anywhere else in the world. And there's that particular yellow rose garden outside the bedroom window that always grows in the shape of a heart. I miss you, Naruto. The few years we had together weren't enough. I want to hold you. I want to kiss you. I want to just know that you're there. I'd storm the gates of hell if I knew you were there, and I'd do the same thing to heaven. I never had any children of my own. I tried to find someone else to love, because you said you wanted me happy. There was this one boy from Kazekage that I thought I loved, but no one could ever compare to you. My heart belongs to you, Naruto. It always has, it always will. You were my happiness. It's been years and now our friends are passing on as well. I'm one of the oldest, so I guess I'm one of the next to go. My yellow hair that you loved so much is white now and I can't hold my fan anymore. Haven't picked the damn thing up in years. It's disheartening actually. I've chronicled your life into a book and titled it The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja 2, in honor of Jiraiya. It's popular amongst the children. Speaking of children, your class all graduated, just as you said they would. The Chunin exams are more of a spectacle now than they are a simulation. But your kids swept the whole thing. By the way, your two top students ended in a tie. They couldn't beat each other, and they dedicated the match to your memory. It was sweet and creepy, in a hero worship kind of way. Tsunade passed on a couple years after Amigakure. I'm sure you've run into her up there. I'm sure that you're still getting onto her for gambling. I'm sure she's still wrangling Jiraiya away from bathhouses. And I'm sure Kakashi still reads Jiraiya's porn. That's their heavens. Want to hear what mine is? You and me. That's heaven. At least for me. I know I've done some bad things in life, but you did so much for me. If I do end up going to hell for some reason, I hope they let angels visit. Just a kiss, that's all I'd ask for. Just one more kiss. It was so very hard to get up this morning, Naruto. So very, very hard. Do you want to know why it was so hard to get up this morning, Sabaku no Temari? A wrinkled face turned to the voice from where she sat at a desk and white eyebrows rose. An old man with a staff stood before her, an old man that she would never forget. It's because you never got up. Hello, Temari. It's good to see you again. Temari narrowed her eyes and turned back to her letter. You're late. A gray eyebrow quirked and hands rubbed on the staff. Beg pardon? You're late. You're 57 years late. I told you before, Temari, I don't get to choose who goes when. I'm merely here to escort you to your fate. The old woman stood to her feet, her bones creaking and huffed. Fine, let's go and get this over with. The old man nodded once and tapped his staff on the ground. Temari blinked and next thing she knew, she was in a hallway with two doors and a robed figure between them. She gasped when she looked at her hands and found the skin to be soft and smooth. A few slaps at her face and she found no wrinkles. A happy laugh escaped her lips, causing the old man to smile. I thought you would appreciate being at the age when you last saw Naruto. Now then, let's take you to your final guide. Temari swallowed the lump in her throat and followed the old man to the mysterious robed figure. He whispered something to the guard of the doors and the head bobbed once, in understanding. The staff wielder turned to Temari with a smile and put a kind hand on her shoulder. This is where we part. My colleague will take you on your way from here. Do as he says. He'll guide you to where you are supposed to be. Temari gave him a smile and nodded her head in understanding before walking past him and standing before the figure. I'm ready. What do I have to do? The hooded head cocked to the side and a scratchy voice echoed from the darkness. Choose your door. Your final place will be beyond the one you choose. Good luck. Temari stared at the figure in disbelief. What? This is how you guys resolve people's afterlives? By a game of freaking chance? Do not question. Only do. Temari huffed and looked at the two doors. They were identical down to the doorknob. How was she supposed to know which one to choose? Her hand twitched from one to the other before that scratchy voice broke the silence. Choose. Before she could think, she opened the door on the right and stepped into pure blackness. The door behind her shut and a hand found its way to her shoulder. Do not fear. I shall guide you to your place. Temari fought back the tears in her eyes, after all these years, trying to make up for bad deeds so she could see her Naruto again, and she ends up in the darkness. It was her worst nightmare come true. She sniffled and the robed figure looked over at her. Do not weep. We do not yet know what your place will be. Temari cast hopeful eyes to the side. You mean? I'm not damned? I don't know. She sobered up a bit at that, and they continued to walk for what seemed like forever until eventually they came to a lone tree standing in the middle of the darkness with a simple plank swing hanging from a thick limb. The robed figure stepped to the side and grabbed a rope. Sit. I'll push you. Temari's face screwed into a scowl and she snarled at whoever was under the cloth. How dare you! That's one of the last things Naruto did for me. If I'm to be punished then so be it, but don't you dare think I'll stand for that. The figure was not moved. Sit. Temari's anger subsided and she sat down forlornly on the wooden plank, her head hanging low as she whispered, "Whatever I did to deserve this, I'm sorry." "And what, my dear Temari, would you have to be sorry for? Seriously, all those years you knew me and you didn't think I'd pull one last prank on you." Temari's back stiffened, and her neck slowly turned to look over her shoulder, hope swelling in her heart. The hood fell back to reveal the golden locks and bewhiskered face of her beloved, his trademark grin in full effect. "Hey, babe. It took you forever to get here." The next thing he knew, he was on his back with a hysterical Temari on top of him, kissing him, touching him, anything to make sure he was real. After she had calmed down, he sat upright with her in his arms. She had so much to ask him, and after several minutes of inane questions, she asked the one he'd been waiting for. "So, is this heaven?" "Yes, it's our heaven." She looked around the darkness again and quirked an eyebrow. "Our heaven? It's black." "Well, duh, it's not finished. I've been waiting for you. Everyone's heaven is different, you know, and mine wasn't complete without you." Temari nodded and let him pull her to her feet. She smiled at the familiar touch and melded against his body again. "So, how do we complete it?" Naruto put a finger to his chin and thought for a second. A devilish smile later, and she was worried. It left immediately when he put his fist under her chin, tilting her head up. "How about this? We close our eyes, kiss until we can't hold our breath any longer, and then we open them. That's it. That's it." She smiled as she threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "That sounds like a damned good plan." The two locked lips, and for a moment, even heaven seemed to stop for them. A love that had been unrequited for decades, one that would last eternity, had finally come back to itself. Temari broke off after a minute, gasping for breath, and heard Naruto whisper in her ear, "Open your eyes, Temari." Slowly, ever so slowly, she cracked her eyes open, and the splendor and beauty of their heaven caused her breath to hitch and a lump to form in her throat. Sheer words could not form the magnificence and scope of what lay before her. To a blissfully happy Temari, it could only be summed up in two words: "Oh my."